right, guys, so we are starting our second video in our figurative language lesson that we've been working on. So you guys watched your very first one last week, and it showed you the beginning stages of figurative language. You talked about the difference between figurative versus literal. And at this point, I hope you understand that when you're speaking figuratively, then you're speaking in a way where your words don't necessarily match the meaning of the words. It's more for the purpose of painting a picture or expressing a point or a mood. And when you speak literally, then your words take on the meaning of the actual words. So this is something that we said we use often in literature, especially a lot in poetry, which is where we're going to go after we get through these figurative language examples. Okay, so you did simile and you did metaphor last week. And just as a quick reminder, if you were utilizing a simile, you know that both similes and metaphors are used to make examples and compare different things. But what you do with a simile versus a metaphor is with a simile, then you know that you're using words like or as. Whereas with a metaphor, you make one object become another object. So saying that the sun was shining like a diamond, then you're talking about how bright and sparkly the sun was, but you're using it in a simile because you're using the word like. But if you say something like, the stars were diamonds in the sky, then you're still comparing the stars in the sky to diamonds, but you're not using like or as. You're making the stars become diamonds, which is an example of a metaphor. Okay, so at the end of last week, you were introduced to another form of figurative language, and that was personification. And personification I like because it's something that we see often. With personification, you are giving an object that is not human. So an animal, an inanimate object like a pencil or an alarm clock or food, and you are giving it human traits. And you see this a lot in poetry. If you look over on the screen, you can see that you have a very interesting looking picture where you have a bulldog where it looks like he's dressed up as a man. So you see that a lot with poetry. And because of Winn-Dixie, you see that a lot when you have the dog smiling, or SpongeBob. SpongeBob is a great example of personification because you're giving a sponge, which is an inanimate object, the ability to talk and dance and eat and have friends just like a human would. So personification, again, is giving human traits to objects or ideas that are not human. And so a couple of the examples here were the sunlight danced. Well, sunlight is not human, so it can't dance. But what that paints for you is the sunlight, sometimes if the rays are peeking through a window or they're going through something and it looks like they're kind of moving across the room. The water on the lake shivers. It kind of gives you an idea that the water's moving. The streets are calling me. You see that a lot if you're really, really hungry and there's pizza that just gets delivered and you can say that the pizza was calling my name. Or if an alarm clock wakes you up in the morning, the alarm clock screamed at me as it went off at 5:30 in the morning. So those are all things that those objects couldn't necessarily do in real life, but you're giving the idea of the sound, or you're trying to paint a picture for the reader, make it more interesting by giving it human traits. Okay, so you all were told to put personification on your chart. So if you did not do that already, remember, because this is a video and it's not live, you can pause it at any time that you want to. So you're going to want to go ahead and have your graphic organizer that you started last week, and you're going to want to add personification to it. Okay. All right. So after you finish personification, we're going to scroll through and we're going to do one here. This is one that I know you guys have seen over and over and over, especially since even in kindergarten. Automatopoeia is another one that you see used, not so much in more mature poetry, but definitely in a lot of your picture books and your poetry that has to do with think about kindergarten. A lot of those books that you read when you were first learning to read, or Dr. Seuss. Automatopoeia is a word that makes a sound. So things like splat and ping, slam, pop, pow, bang, buzz, anything like that that kind of gives the reader an idea of the sound that the object would make. Okay. Automatopoeia, for a word that's really difficult and funny to say, it really has a very simplistic meaning. So automatopoeia, I feel like you guys are probably really familiar with. I want to go back to this one. This is probably one of my favorites for multiple reasons. First off, when I see this, I know that a lot of you guys are going to immediately say, oh, I know how to say this. This is hyperbole. This is not called hyperbole, even though that's exactly what it looks like. The way that you pronounce this figurative language is hyperbole. And hyperbole is when you use extreme exaggeration to get your point across. You're exaggerating to show strong feeling or effect. So here, some of the examples is saying, I will love you forever, or say that you are coming home from vacation and you feel like you've been on the road forever. You might say, oh, my house is 1,000,000 miles away. Literally, your house is not 1,000,000 miles away, but you are expressing that strong feeling of you're ready to get home. I'm so hungry, I could eat a horse. Well, you're not really going to eat a horse, but you're saying that, and you're using hyperbole and that extreme exaggeration to really show how hungry you are. Okay. These jumping jacks are killing me. Okay, well, they may not be fun to do, and maybe you're really tired, but the act of doing jumping jacks is not going to kill you. So again, that's another example of hyperbole. Okay. All right, let me go to this one. This one, an idiom. An idiom is a fun one to do. It's definitely a great example of how figurative language really doesn't mean what you are really saying. And idioms, when we talked about figurative language, we said that when you have people who are visiting from other countries that don't speak English on a regular basis, sometimes they'll hear some of these things that we say, and it kind of catches them off guard, because idioms especially, it does not mean anything like what the words are saying. So if they hear you say that, it sounds very confusing because they understand what the words mean, but they don't understand how you were using them. And idioms, we're going to have a fun example with idioms later in the week, and I'll have a couple little fun songs and videos for you to watch with them. But an idiom is kind of like a saying that is part of our regular language. We say them, and we say them so often that we don't even realize that we're saying them. But an idiom is a saying that isn't meant to be taken literally. Example, you're planning a birthday party and it's supposed to be a surprise. So you tell everybody not to say anything, and you say, don't let the cat out of the bag. Well, I know that that means don't tell anybody the secret. But if you are looking at that literally, then someone's going to think that you have a bag with a cat in it, and someone's telling you not to let the cat out of the bag. Saying you're the apple of my eye. That is also an example of a metaphor, because you're making whoever you're talking about be the apple of your eye. But again, that's a saying that doesn't literally mean that. If someone's being boring and they don't want to do something that you're wanting them to do, you might say, oh, don't be a stick in the mud. Well, they're not literally a stick stuck in the mud. They're just kind of being someone who's not wanting to step out of the box or do something that they wouldn't normally do. Maybe you have been waiting to buy a new pair of tennis shoes, and you say, oh my goodness, these shoes cost me an arm and a leg. Literally, you didn't go to the store and pay with an arm and a leg, but you paid a lot of money. So that is what an idiom means. It's just sayings that we say that have a general understanding in our language, but they definitely don't mean what we think they mean. Okay. So I'm going to tell you to pause again and make sure, so far you should already have simile and metaphor. You need to make sure that you've added personification, automatopoeia, hyperbole, and idiom. So make sure that